Welcome to UCF Knightline, your source for UCF sports and former player information. All right, hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Phegley, and we're coming to you from the 1148 studios. This is episode number 26, and joining me in the studio today is
Trylko.
All right, and joining us by phone, back by popular demand.
As always, this is Troy Andrzak. Thank you for listening.
All righty, that works, because I would have messed up your name just like I always do. We're so glad to have you back joining us today. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to have you on every once in a while, so we've definitely got a ton to talk about, though, today. We've got football coaching changes to talk about. We've got basketball stuff to talk about. People going to the NFL, some players that are in the NFL. We've got some soccer to talk about. We've got some cheerleading to talk about. I know, believe it or not, we will talk about that, but that's one more national championship. Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. I guess we're going to get it rolling. Trace, what do you think?
I think when we were on the recording of this last week, we had all of these changes coming in. Brashad Perryman announcing he was going to go to the NFL draft. The coaching changes all coming down as we were recording. And we said, let's hope Jacoby Glenn doesn't go. And then, boom, a day or two later, we get that news. So I think that's something that has been significant that has changed since we were last doing the podcast.
Troy, I guess I'm going to ask you for what you feel about Glenn and Perryman definitely, going to the NFL. Both of them have put in their notice. Where do we go from here with those two situations?
First off, as a Knight fan, it breaks my heart to see these guys go early. And it's no prejudice or anything. It's just I would love to see these guys here all 4 years on the field. For them going into the pros right now, it puts us in a disadvantageous position. Our wide receivers, the returning wide receivers combined, the entire receiving corps has 15 receptions for their career. Jacoby Glenn makes for completely replacing our secondary. So it does put us behind the eight ball a bit. Now, we've been recruiting these positions. We've got some talent there, and then wide receivers coming up. We were able to offer playing time right away, so we're able to reload because that's what we've been doing under George O'Leary. But it would be great to have these two guys who are NFL caliber players on our squad. Still would have been advantageous for us next season, but we'll overcome it. But it hurts. It definitely hurts.
We're totally revamping both of those positions because now both of our starting corners have left and graduated, four of the five or all of the wide receivers as well. So we're going to have a whole new team to watch next year. It's exciting in a way because we get to see, new people come in and get to see a new team develop, but it's scary as well because we've been so used to seeing those faces and know what they can give us each week, and now it's a huge question mark.
Well, what's interesting is that during our bowl preview discussion, we were talking about who might be the bigger loss, Perryman or Glenn. I thought losing Perryman, we're wide receiver U. There will be guys that step up. I thought having Glenn with some experience anchoring the secondary would be the bigger loss, and now we have to replace both of them. So do we rebuild or do we reload?
In the secondary, we're closer to reloading just because of how well we've recruited the positions. With Kyle Gibson, with the Griffin brothers, with DJ Killings. Moving forward, we've actually taken the time. Now, for wide receivers, Jordan Akins and Taylor Oldham are the only guys who have receptions. Between the two of them, our entire receiving corps has 15 receptions. We went from, talk about feast or famine, having so much experience in the receiving corps to help really grow Justin Holman and to guide him along. Now, to such a young receiving corps, Justin Holman, with only 1 year starting, and, he grew as the year progressed, but we still have issues. He has to guide the receiving corps. He's going to be the leader, the one to bail them out, or, he has to make, a little bit better throws and everything. And with a new offensive coordinator coming in, though Brent Key did call some of the later games in the season, it's really there for me. That's where our issues are going to lie.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We do have, I was just counting here, we have 9 wide receivers that are actually on the roster, and that does not include, this year's signing class. So, there's lots of players there that we haven't seen. The only one, like you were talking about, we've seen Taylor Oldham a little bit and Jordan Akins, but that's it. But out of those, there's 7 other guys there that, we're going to get to see next year, and it'll be fresh new faces that, I'm sure they know how the offense works because they're all either freshmen or redshirted freshmen. One is a redshirt sophomore, and that's Hayden Jones. There's lots of guys. They've been on the practice team for quite a while, and that stuff matters. They get a lot of work done. O'Leary, like I've said before, likes to do the show team a lot there in practice and get those guys accustomed. So I'm not worried about it, really.
Well, there's a difference between the speed of the game in the scout team and the practice squad compared to what you're getting when you're getting onto the field against a live opponent. And not to mention all the emotions and everything that gets into it, you tend to lose focus. It's a completely different game. You need to learn the nuances of how to run your routes, how to read defenses, and to really help Holman out.
One of the good things about going to a bowl game is that you get those additional practices, and boy, are those going to come in even more valuable now that they had those additional practices during December leading up to the bowl in St. Petersburg. Those guys just need more reps and more reps. I know there's a difference between practice and game, but they need that practice time as well, and they got some additional practices because of the bowl.
An absolutely fantastic point where you can't say, if we didn't get to use all of our practices just because of the short turnaround time from the end of the season to our bowl game, but those are invaluable to the young guys. And what gives me a bit of hope, Traquan Smith being the Scout Team Player of the Year, being a wide receiver, hopefully it lessens the transition for him. He's able to make an immediate impact next season.
Yeah, I think it's going to get interesting in the fall or in the spring now, I guess, for sure. Just with all these changes as far as, especially wide receivers go. On the defensive side of the ball, there's quite a few guys that are there as well for defensive backs. I count at least, 7 or 8 guys. So there's guys that are there that we haven't seen. I'm really excited to start seeing Kyle Gibson. He's going to be a very important player, now that Glenn's gone.
I think he's going to be an important player with Glenn there, but now more of the pressure of leading the secondary and guiding everyone making the play calls, because we're also losing 2 of our linebackers, is going to fall on someone as talented as Gibson, but yet as inexperienced as Gibson.
Yeah. We do have a linebacker that is coming from Virginia, I believe, and last year was the year that he had to sit out. We've got a couple young guys that are actually coming back from injuries that didn't get to play last year. So linebacker, it's going to be an all new team, except for a few guys. So it's going to be quite important to get these guys up to speed fast.
You're talking about new guys coming in. I wonder if the coaching changes and some of the departures to the NFL changed the recruiting strategy, or after more than a decade of George O'Leary's helm of the program, that UCF goes about the recruiting process a certain way, and the faces on the coaching staff or the players, they change out, but there's a guiding hand and an overall philosophy with the program.
Troy, give us your opinion on that.
The hire that has me most excited is former UCF Knight, former NFL player, second-round draft pick Travis Fisher, coming to split the duties in the secondary. He went through the system under George at UCF, went off, played in the pros, came back as a graduate assistant. And George O'Leary is well known for hiring his former graduate assistants into, position coaches and hiring guys who used to work with into coordinator positions. They have the same mentality, the same mindset for, how to recruit, the type of athletes that they're looking for, the type of schemes that they run. So you're going to have continuity. If Coach Key is the head coach in waiting, regardless, all the coaching staff in place, they fit along George O'Leary, and we all know he's a bit of a taskmaster, so they have the personalities to be able to succeed in George O'Leary. They have the same type of philosophy as he does moving forward. So this program, with or without George O'Leary, with him leaving, you have the same type of coaches in place. But now with guys like Bresnahan and with Travis Fisher, who have NFL experience, it helps with recruiting for these young guys coming in who their ultimate goal is getting into the NFL, which we are putting quality players into the NFL. And first team, All-Pro Josh Sitton for the Green Bay Packers, UCF alum. We have success there, and these coaches can put these young athletes into that position.
So are you pro Bresnahan? Because there's been some detractors. Obviously, him coming from South Florida is a flag for some folks. They're not going to like that. But others will say this is another one of O'Leary's friends, a guy whose career may be on the downslide. You're in his camp?
I am actually very pro Bresnahan. Some guys have noticed USF is a terrible program. They fired the only coordinator that had success. Their defense They were on the field all the time. They were tired. They still were, though they were 66th in the nation, they were the only thing with hope. They didn't have a ton of good athletes. They haven't recruited well up until recently. Taggart doesn't know what he's doing, which is why Bresnahan was let go. You know, sometimes when you pull trash from a dumpster fire, it's just trash. But this time, just because they didn't know what they had, we found treasure with Bresnahan. He might not be the guy who's going to connect with all the kids, but he's a good coach. He's a good defensive coach. He's going to be able to get these kids prepared for what they want, and that's futures in the NFL. I think we got a really good hire. People can just complain because they're from USF, and there's few people who despise USF like I do. But Bresnahan was their one talented individual in that program, and I'm happy to have him in Orlando.
All right, speaking of Bresnahan, I got a couple clips I want to play here real quick. The first one is going to be him on getting the job, and then I'm going to play another one, and it's going to be him on rebuilding the secondary. And then the next one, it is going to be on basically what he intends to do with the defense.
To me, it's a tremendous honor. And I have so much respect for Coach that when he made the call, it was a no-brainer. You know, and my wife and I talked, and you know, we were together back at Georgia Tech. That's when we first got married, and she was like, "You got to go do this." And so it's not just me; it's a family thing, and we feel very comfortable with it. But the history here, and knowing that this is a successful program, and it's already intact. It's not like you're building from scratch or anything like that. Really excited about it. To me, that's football. You know, having grown up the son of a coach and, you know, been at all different levels of coaching and spending so much time in the NFL, you know, that happens every year in the NFL. You got to rebuild your team. So when it comes here, it's really that next man up philosophy that you hear when an injury happens during the year. That's no different now. You know, you lose these kids. Well, that's your job to go out and recruit new talent to come in and build the depth and build up your squad that shouldn't be an effect, you know, have an effect on you. So there's a challenge, but I'm excited. You know, the respect level I have for Coach O'Leary is incredible. And, you know, hopefully I can bring some experience and some things that can enhance this program. I'm not here to change anything. I'm here to enhance it. And I'm going to do whatever he expects me to do and do it to the best of my ability and keep this program going where it's been already.
I like the way that he sounds. I like the way that he talks. I like the way that, you know, he's sure. He's not worried about, you know, rebuilding any of this stuff, and, you know, he's done it before, and he's excited to be here. I think that he is going to be a quality coach, and I'm excited to see what he can do.
Are you sure you like how he sounds and the way he talks, or just what he said? Because he kind of sounds a little bit like a Keebler Elf. But he said all the right things and everything as a UCF fan that you want to hear. He knows the road ahead, the challenges that lie in front of him, and the experience he's going to bring in to be able to help us through this transition.
I have a question for you both. Who do you think is under more pressure, Brent Key or Bresnahan?
I think unequivocally it's Key. You know, a lot of people have talked about he's the guy who's going to replace George O'Leary, you know, at the helm, but yet there's also a lot of backlash from the fans because, you know, we're just not sold yet, and we're not sold that we want this head coach in waiting position so much as, you know, why not open it up, because UCF is a position that a lot of young coaches would like to come to. So Bresnahan's been there. He's done that. Some people see him on the slide, but I still think he's a good coach. But Key, no one's been able to, I guess, accuse him of being a good coach yet. Right.
Bresnahan brings a lot of experience. He has his playing experience. He has his coaching experience at the college level and in the NFL. Key, really, what's his experience been? I mean, yes, he played, he coached a little bit. He's been here for 10 years, you know, so he's definitely knows the system, but it's his first year as an offensive coordinator. I don't think that anybody wouldn't be looking at him maybe with a magnifying glass, you know, just to make sure that he doesn't do something wrong, and he will definitely be the person that is the scapegoat probably if it does go wrong.
I would say in the early part of the season, though, that Bresnahan's defense is going to get tested with South Carolina, with Stanford, both road games, and I think people are going to look to those games to see if we're headed in the right direction. So, to me, early on, he's under more pressure because Knights fans are going to want to win at least one of those games on the road.
We've also got to come up with offense for that, though, too. And the thing about that is that it's George O'Leary defense. That's not going to change, and I don't think a lot is going to change with Bresnahan. I think it may just be coached fundamentally maybe a little bit differently.
we were prepared mentally with our 2 failures, over in Ireland and in Missouri, especially defensively in that first game, the Croke Park Classic, and where our secondary, which was stout as the year progressed and really helped us in many games, we gave the wide receivers acres of space to run in. We didn't transition well to the ball after the throw, and especially when we played prevent defense at the end and they got the game-winning field goal. Knight fans have seen that before. But we also saw how, as the season progressed, so did the defense. And, there were times when we played good teams, we hemorrhaged yards and points, but there's other times when the defense won us games. The offense, on the other hand, it's a work in progress. And, to be honest with you, Holman had a lot of good stats, but there were times where we were very unhappy as a fan base.
All right, well then, speaking of Coach Key and the helm that he will have, let's hear from him really quick. We've got audio from him too, so I'm going to play that now.
As a coach, you're always trying to move up, and you don't want to stay status quo. You want to be able to move up and progress up the ladder, and Coach O'Leary has given us the opportunity to do that over the last several years, and this is just kind of the next step in the coaching ladder, and being able to stay here and be at UCF, a place that's been home now for over 10 years for me, and have this challenge and this opportunity is awesome. The biggest thing from Charlie that I learned was that you play to what your strengths are, and to play to what personnel you have on offense, and you can't be pigeonholed into any one thing. And if your personnel dictates you to spread the ball out like we did a couple years ago and throw it around with Blake, or being able to protect a young quarterback, or being able to run the football with experienced running backs, and just whatever your personnel dictates. And at the end of the day, the offensive coordinator's job is to have the offense put points on the board and outscore the opponent. Consistency. He had I think there was a point in the season where it was going good game, bad game, good game, bad game. And he was able to put about 4 games together, really consistent. Then we were inconsistent as a group in the last game of the season. And I think having an entire year of starting under his belt, now being able to move forward and be consistent throughout an entire season, that's going to be the biggest challenge, because not only the consistency out of him, but there's great competition with the other guys behind him. So I think competition is going to continue to prove him and make him a more consistent player.
All right, so that's what Coach Key had to say. That last one, I probably should have set that up a little bit better, was about what he needed to see and wanted to see from Holman this year. And then he said that his main thing that he wanted to see there was consistency from Holman. And I think consistency all around is what I want to see from UCF football this year.
Especially on the offensive line. You're going to need the strong play of the offensive line, a reestablishment of the running game. If you have those two things, another year of Justin Holman's development, maybe we can get by with some wide receivers who are learning on the fly a bit more.
I think Trace nailed it right there. Consistency on the offensive line is what we wanted so badly last season, and we just never got it. And moving from Key to now Modridge to the offensive line, it's not like Coach Key didn't try to find the proper, recipe amongst the players and get, rotate different guys in there to see, what type of cohesiveness they had. And then Modridge is going to have the same thing, but we lose Torian Wilson. But, hopefully we'll have Joey Grant nice and healthy this season, as opposed to, last season. And Wyatt Miller coming in has, been a hot name you've heard all the coaches say on the scout team. And then the 2 recruits we have coming in, Luke Ayers and Tyler Hudanik, who just verbally committed this morning, are 2 mean, nasty monsters which you want on your offensive line. So I think Modridge is a talented coach, and if he can get the offensive line to play consistent, like Trey said, that's going to just make the transition so much easier, and it's so important. We talk over and over again how important offensive line is, and sometimes it seems redundant, but it is. It's an exceptionally important component of a good offense.
Well, when you look at the bowl game, where were we out-muscled on both sides of the ball on the lines? And if you look at what a big difference is between those Power 5 teams and the rest, it is depth on the lines, strength on the lines. You can get the skill positions, but can you get those big bodies on the lines that are going to be the difference makers for a program like UCF?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's not just, we get talented guys on the line. We put a lot of guys into the NFL, like I touched on with Josh Sitton previously, but it's that depth you touched on. Having those guys, redshirt a year, and then their freshman and sophomore years, they're still working out and bulking up and getting the required strength. And they come in, they're experienced, they're mature, they're strong. We just don't have that. If you're an incredibly talented player, you start your first year, and you don't do that in a lot of these Power 5 programs. And if you can control the line of scrimmage with your offensive and defensive line, you're controlling the tempo of the game.
And, if you were listening to a podcast for any other rest of the, the non-Power 5 conferences, wouldn't this be the same discussion that people would be having? Don't they have this discussion at a Boise State, a Colorado State, a Marshall? How do they regroup and rebuild? It's not like the Power 5 programs where they have such demand that they're simply out recruiting one another for those, offensive linemen and defensive linemen. We're all in that group where we're going to lose some players in one position. We have to regroup. It's not like being Florida State where you've got that talent just flowing in. UCF's got to fight and scrape during the recruiting process and then coach those guys up, as George O'Leary and his staff throughout the decade have shown. They can coach up a guy like a Josh Sitton and make him into an NFL All-Pro.
Exactly. Look at what Ron Zook did at Florida. And Will Muschamp, for example, they had these top recruiting classes over and over, but they couldn't, coach these young men up. We've been able to do that with all these 2-stars we put in the NFL Pro Bowl, and all the success we've had with conference championships and 10-win seasons. We have good coaches. Scratch that. We have some great coaches that have done a fantastic job of getting their type of athlete into our program, and our program is a shining light for amongst all the G5s.
Yeah, you just talked about how we have great coaches. We do have great coaches, and we have especially a guy named George O'Leary that has built this thing basically from a spot that was not good, that was not going anywhere, and he's come in and made it. Yes, I think at some point we're all naysayers sometimes for George O'Leary, but I think he's done a heck of a job, and I think it's smart that he brings in these guys that he does bring in that he knows, and of course a little bit of it so he can have his thumb on them, but it does make a lot of sense, bringing back guys that can recruit.
If this podcast existed 5 years ago or 10 years ago, would we have been having discussions about the quality of the bowl game we were in, or the players we're losing to the NFL draft, or the coaches being stolen by bigger programs? We used to get our coaches from the University of Florida. Now they're coming and taking our coaches. That's a change in the direction of the program that we've gotten used to, a higher level, and that's why we want more as fan base of this program.
Yeah. But you're going to see that more and more, and when people start taking your coaches and for their staffs because they want them, it's because you're doing good stuff. Speaking of good stuff, I've got 2 clips here I want to play from George O'Leary, and then we're going to move into a little bit more recruiting, talking about the recruits that are here for the weekend. So I'm going to play these quotes from George O'Leary real quick. One is him on Perryman and Glenn leaving for the NFL, and the other one is the question that we will not even address here on UCF Knightline Podcast anymore, but it's about him retiring.
With Bashard, he applied to the NFL Advisory Committee, and he got his answer back, and they call and tell me the same answer, and he sat down with his family and thought it was his best interest to go on this year, and all you do is wish him well and hope it all works out for him. Jacoby, I never knew till the Wednesday before he came in with his uncle and decided that he wanted to leave. And I think they're 2 different cases, I do, but I wish them all well and move on. Some you're happy with, some I think they should be making other decisions, but you wish them well and hope it all works out the best for them and their family. I've always said that when I think it's time, and when you're not efficient, I think it is time to move on, but that's not the case right now. And I enjoy just the competition, college football, the game of football, and basically I'll continue going until I feel it's where that becomes more than work. Right now it's not work, it's something I thoroughly enjoy.
Andrew, I know you don't want to talk about possible retirement on the Knightline Podcast for George O'Leary, yet you just played that quote, that clip. One quote from him to the Associated Press that's entertaining. Quote, "I love the competition, and then as Bobby Bowden said, there's only one great event after you retire. That's your funeral, so I'm trying to avoid that one. I was home over Christmas, and I gave thought to it and stuff, but there's only so many times a day you can walk the dog. You can't go from 100 miles an hour to 0. He's 68 years old. That's going to be the speculation. Reporters need to write stories and file copy. The same thing is going on in Columbia, South Carolina, with those rumors swirling around a coaching legend in Steve Spurrier. Gets to that point in age. Remember, Bobby Bowden coached into his 80s, so we may have a little bit more of George O'Leary left.
Yeah, and Paterno did as well, until that whole situation got really weird there. But speaking of Paterno really quick, they gave him back most of those wins, or all of those wins that they took away because of Sandusky, and so he is actually now the most winningest coach ever in college football again. They gave him 111 victories back, I think it was, or
they gave him 111 back.
So maybe Bobby Bowden needs to come back so he can retake the lead.
Yeah, well, whatever. I've more power to him if he wants to do that.
He speaks about the one great event after retirement for coaches. What happened to Joe Paterno and Paul Bear Bryant almost immediately after they retired? So George O'Leary will be looking at either probably death or divorce after he retires, because you think his wife will be able to handle him around the house, all day, every day?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty dramatic a list of choices right there. I don't think you can put a ban or a moratorium on this topic, but I think that when you discuss it, it adds fuel to it, and it's going to happen when it's going to happen. And when we end up discussing these things too much, that has the potential to impact recruiting. You want kids to come here because they want to be at UCF and not be distracted by which coaches may be coming and going.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so I think we're going to move our conversation on more to recruiting now and the recruits that we have in town this week. I think that we have about 10 people in town this weekend to talk to the staff and have their official visits and see what it looks like and what the weather's like and, the whole deal. Troy, who do you think is our most important recruit that we have that we really need to get taken care of and signed up and ready to go?
Well, we have a litany of wide receivers. Imani Spence, I'm a big fan of Jared Pinkney, who is being recruited now at Florida because Kurt Callahan left. And then in the secondary, a young man by the name of Brandon Scott, who has been here this weekend, one of the 11 recruits that have been here all weekend long. He's a big-time target and a big-time player. The kid's good size, good athlete. Reminds me a little bit of Glenn with the cover skills. Randy, who's going against high school kids. But I'm looking at Pinkney, which I don't know if we're going to get, in Scott, which actually they're very hopeful that we're going to get. So those two guys, in my book, seeing their tape, those are the guys that are UCF Knights written all over them.
You mentioned earlier some guys returning on both sides of the ball. We talked about Taylor Oldham and some of those names. Do you see any of these new recruits coming in and playing immediately? I mean, we don't think of the cupboard as being that bare at these positions. There is talent already on the roster. Are any of these guys potential first-year starters for us?
Absolutely, and the wide receivers especially, just because, like I touched on earlier, 15 receptions. Jordan Akins, a grown man with 12 receptions, is our most experienced player on game time and in career numbers. I mean, we need some athletes in that position. So that's how we're going to get some of these young wide receivers, is because we can offer, playing time. We have a lot of kids, that were walk-ons and playing on the scout team, but, it's just completely different than the type of athletes that we're going after in, on the recruiting trails. The wide receivers, yes. The secondary, just because we have recruited so well, I don't know. I mean, Brandon Scott has an opportunity to come in and, he could come in as a nickelback, because we saw inconsistency from DJ Killings and from Shaquem Griffin, but we also saw some bright points. So I'm hoping those kids can really come in and play. And, of course, as we touched on Kyle Gibson, but Brandon Scott does have an opportunity to come in and get some playing time.
What about Cameron Stewart? What do you think? Is he still, I know he's still committed to us, but do you think that that's going to happen?
He sounds a lot more solid than he did 3 or 4 months ago. Nebraska still hasn't given up on him, though they've had a coaching change. But he seems, in Twitter sphere and everything else, he seems more and more, committed to UCF. Before he was a 70% commit. Now he's starting to talk about UCF more. Nebraska seems to be going on the back burner a bit. And then, of course, all the turnover we've had at wide receiver and the fact that we've had a sustained success at UCF. Plus, across the nation this weekend, it's cold as can be. Here, it's beautiful this weekend. I've been in my attic all morning and kind of upset about that, because every time I, get out to go get some supplies or something, I'm like, man, I wish I was outside running around or doing something today. It's just a beautiful weekend for recruiting. This is what you want when you bring kids to UCF on campus, a beautiful campus, and this time of year.
A big sway on Stewart is he's quoted as saying he has family in Jacksonville, Tallahassee, Miami, and Pensacola, so all over the state. inking him would be good for attendance as well, because he'll have a lot of people at the games.
Yeah, one of the quotes that he also made, though, that I think is important, I have the opportunity to start as a freshman. Most schools I'd have to wait until my sophomore year or after a red shirt.
And he's a big kid. He's 6'3", about 185 pounds. He was our first verbal commit to this class, and he's been one of our most important commitments, him and Bo Schneider and Ruth Ayers, as guys who we really, stayed on verbally, good communication, and gone and visited to make sure they stay a UCF Knight.
Speaking of staying a UCF Knight, what if there was this early signing period that they've started talking about for, future years? Would these players sign, their first instinct, and then who knows how recruiting would work after that?
Well, it's something George O'Leary has been wanting for a while, and you can't blame him. When you have, like UCF, cash-strapped programs, they're going out Monday to go see Bo Schneider. That's extra money on a kid who, literally recruited us. Money we could save to do something else, time and energy. However, UCF has had quite the track record of flipping late recruits when you have different coaching changes, and like we had coaching changes, and I really believe our coaching changes have helped us on the recruiting trail, especially adding Travis Fisher and Thacker. We were able to flip Kyle Gibson last year from Vanderbilt when James Franklin went to Penn State. Early signing period, Kyle Gibson could be with Vanderbilt. Same with some of these kids that are committed that are coming in now, like Brandon Scott, and some of them, they could have committed, signed already. We weren't able to flip them. UCF, especially in the past couple of years, has really utilized the late period to be able to flip some talented young men over to us. Now, we've lost a few guys here and there on signing day. That happened. I know George O'Leary doesn't like that. He doesn't like, how 18-year-olds behave sometimes. But this non-early signing period has helped out UCF in the long run.
I just think all of this is a wash, no matter what the deadline is that you have the signing. We're going to win some, we're going to lose some. That's going to be that way on recruiting day. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of this is overemphasized. UCF is going to get blasted no matter what happens on February 4th signing day, that its recruiting class wasn't high enough, that we were behind one or two more teams in the AAC, that we didn't out-recruit this team or that team. And then I look at 4 or 5 years after a recruiting class and see who we produced. 2-star guys coached up to be NFL All-Pros. This coaching staff, the coaches may change, but there's been a consistent philosophy on coaching up players, moving them up from the quality of 2-star to more stars. I think our rivals assign stars. It's their business model. They get people talking. They have a lot of loyal people that are interested in recruiting. It is important, obviously, to make sure that cupboard's not bare and that you're replacing talent. But UCF has shown consistently that it can coach up players. I mean, take a look at some of these recruiting rankings. The University of Florida, a lot of upheaval in its coaching. It's had some down years. Ranked in the 120s for a while there behind MAC programs. Does anybody really believe that a Western Michigan is going to out-recruit a University of Florida when all is said and done? Sure, Florida may lose a recruit to Alabama. That's fine. That's possible. Or they're going to lose somebody to Florida State. But to see that they're ranked in the 120s at a point in this year is ridiculous to me. We will not fare well on recruiting day in terms of our overall number of stars and rankings, but I think that class will produce more dividends than downsides. Absolutely. And I do believe that coaching is obviously key to this, and this is what we were talking about the entire time, is taking those people and coaching them up to be these guys that are 2 and 3 stars, coaching them up to be NFL players and good players for us on Saturdays.
Well, here's your thing. What's your end game? What's your goal with this recruiting class? Let's look at the guys, the teams that were in the playoffs. All of them top 5 recruiting classes over the past couple of years. Listen, stars don't mean everything. Clearly, this is the closest thing to Common Core that I can come to is UCF is going to get, downtrodden on. We're going to have like the 80th recruiting class, and we're going to produce some damn good players, period. That comes from the coaching. That comes from the type of kids we bring in. However, the higher the recruiting classes do dictate the farther you go into the playoffs and you're competing for national championships. Is UCF going to get there? No, I don't believe so. Are we going to have a better recruiting class than what the numbers state? Absolutely. However, the recruiting process is fascinating to fans. You have the play on the field, which of course we all love, but when you're not playing, you got to have something to talk about. And what instills hope? hope for the future and keeps you just drawn in during the dead period is the recruiting period. And it's the legacy of the program and the kids whose fathers played for us, and like Troy Greenwood, that was a terrible idea, or other things moving forward. The recruiting process is such an exciting part of being a college football fan and, getting kids to come to your school, to your alma mater, that, it holds a lot of football fans in.
That is very true. Thank you so much for joining us today, Troy.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. You have a fantastic weekend. I look forward to talking to you shortly.
Right after this message here, we're going to talk a little bit about basketball. So, you know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We don't need to know about your fun-filled weekend in the City of Sin, but we hope you'll click the ad on our website. It's right there to the left, the one that screams you have to save up to 50% off your next trip to Vegas. Just click on the ad and we promise never to talk about what happened in Vegas.
This is Quincy McDuffie, and you're listening to UCF Knightline.
Alrighty, here we are. We're back, and we're talking about basketball. This week was kind of an interesting week for UCF basketball. We had a couple things that happened. Number one, on Wednesday, we won in triple overtime over Tulane at the CFE Arena, which was absolutely awesome, 103-100. The environment inside CFE Arena was absolutely electric, and it's not that way every week. It maybe should be. I think that this team would take a lot from that. Donnie Jones and the players both in the press conferences said how important it is to have the student section full and to have more fans there and cheering.
Well, it's not just about winning, but winning is important in a football-crazed state like Florida. I would say, though, that when you look at the crowds from when Donnie Jones first started here and where they are now, not only in terms of fans but students as well, there has been a noticeable decline. I think the announced crowd was around 4,000 the other night. We were a program that was averaging close to 6,000 in this new arena not too long ago. So there is some apathy and some lack of interest on the part of the fan base. As for the team, if you know that they gave up nearly 100 points in back-to-back games and one went triple overtime, that tells you that the other one didn't go very well, and they lost Saturday's game at Memphis 99-79. A couple of statistics jump out at you from that game. The Knights, from the UCF news release, it says they came into that game last in the American Athletic Conference in rebounding margin, and in this game, they were beat 53-24 on the glass. Memphis, in fact, finished with more offensive rebounds than UCF had total rebounds. If you put 79 on at Memphis, you like your chances in winning the game. We lose by 20. Back-to-back weeks now where we have stumbled on the weekend game, but had an electric, exciting finish in the midweek game. If you remember, the previous week was the overtime game with Houston, with Brandon Goodwin winning on those back-to-back threes. So the better of the two games, obviously, this week, and more exciting for UCF basketball fans, was the triple overtime win over Tulane.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, it was really exciting. I actually really enjoyed myself. They played with more fire and more heart than they have the entire time. They definitely fought their way through that game, the Tulane game. Not nearly as much with Memphis. Maybe they did fight, but they did not come out on top. Again, Memphis 99, UCF 79. I am going to play a little bit of audio from Donnie Jones and what he had to say after the Tulane game.
First of all, thanks for everybody sticking around tonight. I know it was a long game, and first thing I told the guys when we walk in, let's put 5 more minutes back up on the clock and go play again. But that's easy to say that after a win. But really proud of the guys tonight. Obviously, it's a great game. Tulane, there's a reason they're 3-1 coming in here. Ed's done a great job with his basketball team. And when you get to conference play, anything can happen. As you can see, every night it's a battle across the country. And tonight, I thought our team, there's plenty of possessions in the game. We sat and thought, well, you know what? We're really in trouble right now. Or we're right there. We're up. We're going to be fine. But it was back and forth so much tonight. I was really proud of our team, how they stayed and kept their composure. We talk about most of the time there's 140 possessions in a game. 70 offensive or 70 defensive. And tonight you probably had 215 possessions in a game that where our guys could have tucked their head when it didn't go well. Not sure if I played in a game where it was even at halftime, even after the game, even after the first time out, even after the second time out, and finally the third time out, we ended up winning. But it was a hard-fought game, and it was really a great victory for our young basketball team.
Saturday's loss at Memphis dropped UCF to 9-8 overall, 2-4 in the American Athletic Conference. That right now is good for 8th out of the 11 teams. And the week ahead is one of those Thursday-Sunday splits. The Thursday game is on the road at UConn. Sunday, UCF returns home to play Cincinnati. Both are going to be tough games, Andrew.
Yeah, they will. Cincinnati, I think if we could win one of these two games, it would be that Cincinnati game. I know that you differ in opinion on that, but I think that would be the one that we could win out of those two. I don't see us doing too well at UConn.
Well, any road games for UCF are going to be tough. I agree. I think Cincinnati may be a better chance, but Cincinnati just thrashed Temple, who beat UCF. I know on any given day, on any given court, anyone can win, but if UCF can continue to get splits during the week, that might be a good sign for the program. That's a tough game on the road at UConn.
It absolutely is. Okay, in other UCF sports news this week, Romario Williams was picked number 3 overall by the Montreal Impact in the MLS Super Draft. And then 2 women were picked for the National Women's Soccer League. Tatiana Coleman and Carly Williams both were at UCF and did a lot at UCF to get picked for the Women's Pro League.
And it's good to see Knights players going into professional leagues, no matter what the sport is, continuing their sporting careers when they leave the black and gold.
Absolutely. The cheerleading teams as well are in the national championship thing tonight that they're doing. They're at ESPN Wild World of Sports, and I guess at 8 p.m. tonight or somewhere in there they will be competing for the national championship against Alabama, Kentucky, Minnesota, Ole Miss, I believe, are the people that they are. Teams.
You're speaking of our 2-time national champions. You made light a bit last week of the women's rugby team with its back-to-back.
I did not. Hey, it was on the show, so I didn't make light of it.
This is true, but the cheerleading squad won national championship in 2003 and 2007. Right now, they're continuing a streak of 8 straight top 5 finishes. So good luck to them.
All right, absolutely. And Trace, we wanted to talk a little bit about UCF former president Trevor Colburn.
Yeah, Trevor Colburn became president of UCF in 1978 and was part of that changeover from it being Florida Technological University to what we all know and love now as UCF. On the sports side of the equation, the president Colburn established UCF's football program back in 1979. Our fans, I don't think, always appreciate. Some loyal, long-term fans do. They know from where we came. A volunteer coach. The team won its inaugural game. They beat St. Leo College 21-0 in a cow pasture. Rain-soaked. They were dodging puddles. He believed in football. A quote from the UCF news release about his passing. A lot of people thought I was crazy to start football, Colburn said in 1998. 3 years after UCF's football program advanced to Division 1A, but it was the key to open doors for visibility. He was inducted into UCF Athletics Hall of Fame, and look where we are now. We have an on-campus stadium, bowl appearances, national recognition, players in the NFL. That started with his dream and his vision, and it's good to remember him and his contribution to what we know and love as the University of Central Florida Knights.
Alrighty, rest in peace, Trevor Colburn. Thank you so much for what you did for UCF. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Knightline Podcast. And this is Andrew Phegley, and this was episode number 26. Thank you so much to Troy and
Trace Trylko.
All righty. Thank you very much. We will see you next week.
UCF, charge on to the field. With our spirits, we'll never yield. Black and gold charge right through the heart. Victory is our cry. BSCTO, tonight our Knights will shine.